This meeting is being
Good
recorded.
evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code Slam the Gavel for 10% off your first year of Urgent Assist. And this is also available in 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother narcolepsy passed away 5 months ago. He is autistic and needs structured routine therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he cannot speak or understand the language. He will be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul, New York State at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 to please keep Bradley safe here in these United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I have 2 return guests on. I have Claudia Ovalles from Texas on, and I last had her on season 2, episode 46 and season 4, episode 33. And I have Rael LaPenta here from Pennsylvania, and she was last on season 4, episode 66. We're going to talk about custodial interference and how it could have prevented Kaydens Law. So welcome you both. And we're going to talk a lot about this custodial interference and how parents can get involved in a lot of things, as well as National Parents Organization. So I welcome you both.
Thank you. Thanks for having us back.
Definitely. Definitely. How can parents, a lot of them have been so traumatized through all of this family court, everyone's exhausted and really beaten down. How can they get involved?
Well, I think you have to be in the right place because, like you said, a lot of parents are overwhelmed. They feel like they are doing this alone, and that their case is just so difficult that they're having a hard time finding support groups or some way where to turn, or they don't know a lot of the help that's out there. And so what we have learned to do is we've joined these support groups. We kind of know who the advocates are, and we've been in touch with them, and we collaborate on a lot of different issues, and most of us have dealt with the same thing. And one of the biggest things that we've experienced is when you're denied to see your child, and that a lot of that is what everyone has in common: denial of access, or the parent-child relationship interference, custodial interference, the breakdown between the parent and the child. It all kind of connects, and a lot of it has to do with custodial interference. When you have those rights to see your child, and yet the other person is trying to damage that by withholding the child or keeping them away or empowering them not to want to visit you, all those things. So what we've learned to do is find those groups, talk to each other, and see if everyone's interested in actually making a difference. And I'm sure I kind of got a little bit off the topic, but that's kind of how we did it. It was just, having the common issue, and then what can we do? Mm-hmm. And someone might have an idea, they could share it, and like, hey, I could do that too. And it just kind of grows from there.
I think that's a good point, Claudia. The first step is self-care. So this is a horrible nightmare and everybody's so upset about it. But at least in our cases, we found we had to deal with it, and we felt so helpless that this kind of advocacy that we do really helps that. It's very empowering, and it's a good distraction, and you feel like you're accomplishing something. So if people want to join, we encourage them to go to our Facebook page and their specific state group, and just reach out and say, you don't need any experience to do this. We walk everybody through all the beginning steps, because I had no idea what I was talking about, like a year ago. Like I had nothing, and you learn it quickly. So, we just encourage people to give it a try. It could help.
Right. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I find a lot of parents finding themselves becoming advocates. Whether you like, I hate to say it, whether you like it or not, going through this, you end up talking to other parents and you start lifting each other up.
Exactly. Like it could be, you heard about reading a certain book and then you shared that book with someone else, and then you discuss it, or have you read this other person, or are you following this other individual? They're really have some really interesting ideas on how to talk to your child, and it kind of grows from that. But advocacy can be a lot of different things. It could be, like you said, it could be just talking to another parent, going to a group. You might be ahead of a parent that's experienced this, and you develop some coping skills that you can pass on, or maybe some suggestions, like maybe what not to text back, or what not to say in a conversation to your child that could kind of, make the conversation go down a negative way. And they're just small little suggestions, and that's advocacy, because now you're helping someone based off your experience or something you learned. But Rael and I, we've taken it a little bit further. We've actually getting involved with making a change so that some of these things or these issues can be corrected, or parents can learn from them, or we just have a movement going. And it started off as something that we both experienced, and then we just kind of took it from there, and we used everything in our experience to share as a process or a step to get from one point to the other. And we just communicate that through parents. And it is empowering, because it may not have changed your personal outcome, but I'm making a change somehow for someone else or for another child. And and it's not so much that I don't want to help because no one helped me kind of attitude. It's I want to make a difference, and this is what I could do to pay it forward. And I wish someone would have been there to do it for me, but they weren't. But I learned something, and I'm still here, so why not share what I know? That type of thing.
Well, definitely. When you're going through custodial interference, as in, well, I'll take my case, for instance. He withheld these kids on 3 separate occasions. And so you'd go to the state troopers and they would fill out, I didn't know to fill out an offense report. I did not know that. Not that anything would have come from that, but I told my attorney what happened. She immediately filed an emergency petition in contempt, and it went before a different judge, who then yelled at my ex, and he gave me more time with the kids. But that didn't mean he followed his order either. So what's happening is, I think the frustration for parents is they're just constantly, these judges are giving these abusers a slap on the wrist and not taking this custodial interference seriously. Now
Right.
what?
Right. And a lot of parents, me included, think that everything has to be resolved in family court, and it doesn't, because when you understand the different types of law, criminal and civil, there are different options. And I always questioned, I'm like, if I have a piece of paper and I'm supposed to get my son, then why isn't the police helping me? I reported it to them. So where does it go from there? What happens? And then your attorney says, oh, well, we now have to go and file a motion for this. And I'm like, okay, well, let's do that, because I'm losing time. I'm losing precious time. And then you gotta wait that out, and then you get billed for something that hasn't happened yet. And then when you get there, like, okay, I'm ready. What's going to happen now? Is he going to get in trouble? And they're like, hey, don't do that again.
Yeah.
And you can't get makeup time because the child is out of state and they're in school now. But dad, don't do that again. And it happens over and over and over. And there is no fix. There's no accountability. And so we kind of come to the penal code, the criminal side of it.
And there should be accountability. That's why the law was made. That's what the Department of Justice has published, years ago, has said there's a reason that they're civil and criminal. And, it's frustrating and confusing about why somebody decided along the path in the police department that it shouldn't be, but that's not, the reason it was written.
Right. And one of the other options, and I don't know if parents know this enough. I know I kept hearing the word writ of habeas corpus when I was communicating with some local advocates. When you don't get your child for a visit, they could file a writ of habeas corpus. And I'm like, well, what is that? That must not apply to me. That must apply to them only. I didn't know the difference of why my attorney wasn't doing this. And then I asked one time, I'm like, okay, this is like the 6th or 7th denial. Isn't there like a writ of habeas or something you could be filing? And she would not acknowledge what I said. She wouldn't explain what it was. She kind of just was very dismissive of the idea. And so I later found out that the first remedy, the quickest remedy is a writ of habeas instead of a motion for enforcement or a motion for contempt. And a writ of habeas or habeas corpus means bring the body. So that means that you file it and the other parent must bring the child before the court and basically explain, why do you have the child and why doesn't the other parent have the child if that's what this order says? And in my situation, it's not something that attorneys will make money off of because it's the quickest remedy. And they don't want the quickest remedy because then it's not a lot of it, the money that doesn't, that you would need for motion for enforcement isn't the same because it's a quicker way to get your child back. And so my attorney just ignored the idea. But then when this happened to me, I did it myself. And I went before a judge, pro se, and the judge told me, well, we don't do that. And I'm looking at case law. I'm trying to understand this is what it says in case law, that this is the quickest remedy. But why are you telling me we don't do that? Well, that would traumatize the child. We don't do that. Like, well, the child's being traumatized right now anyway, because I can't see the child can't see the parent. But why are you ignoring the quickest way? And so I had to argue that situation, and I kept citing case law, and this was over Zoom, of course, and she ended up changing her mind. She says, fine, I'll sign it, and now here, go away. And but it is possible. It's just many parents don't realize that that's the option, and it's not something that you can file over a weekend. Let's say you don't get the child on a Friday, and then you're going to go Monday and you're going to file it because your weekend visitation is over. This is something you could do like on a winter break or a summer because you would still have that possession time. The child would have still been in your possession. So a lot of parents don't realize that, and I think they need to, if you're going to go, the civil route. But back to what Rael and I do is that we work on the criminal side. We work on informing parents of that. She mentioned the Department of Justice putting out these laws over 40 years ago, but they also put out guidance and manuals and instructions that kind of breaks it down what law enforcement, what they should be doing. And they even give you guidance if law enforcement ignores you. This is what the type of wording that you should be telling them. They break it down, but again, a lot of parents are just kind of have those blinders on that everything is resolved in family court, everything. And when a law enforcement officer denies you of that report and says this is a civil matter, you believe them. You take their word for it because you truly believe that they know the law and that what they're telling you is the complete truth. But it's not, because this law is so uncommon for them to enforce that it's like a bad learning habit. You know, I come in as a new officer, I come across one of these cases, I turn to my supervisor or my sergeant or someone next to me, and I'm like, okay, so how do we handle this? He goes, that's a civil matter. Tell them to get an attorney. Okay, that's the end of our little police, business there. And then the parent goes on their way, and the officer now learns it themselves. Hey, the next time I come across one of these cases, I'm just going to tell the parent it's a civil matter and be on our merry way to the next call. That's the bad learning habit. And that's the problem, because this has been around for over 40 years. And we've researched it. Rael has helped me research it, and we find so many publications. We have found instructions from, I believe it was the district attorney of New Jersey, that they actually broke down what they actually do. And if they have these manuals out there, why are these other states, following that? And but anyhow, I don't want to take up the whole explanation, because
No, you're fine. Yeah, how would this have helped, if this custodial interference laws, and if they were followed like they should be, how would this have stopped or avoided Kaydens happening?
Well, we know that several of the cases, so in each state, well, in Kayden specifically, Kayden Mancuso in Pennsylvania, her mom tried to enforce custodial interference several times, meaning that the child was withheld and put with, her father when she wasn't entitled to be lawfully, and the police ignored it. So if the police would have done something, that could have prevented that. And we know that that's also the case in several other states that have that are passing a Kaydens Law or trying to pass a Kaydens Law. Those parents also tried to go to the police first to enforce custodial interference and were denied.
Right, and we confirmed the situation with the Kayden Mancuso case, because we had a conversation with a representative, and they confirmed that yes, the mother did attempt to call law enforcement to assist with the return of Kayden. And like I said, they often tell you, we're not going to get involved. We don't get involved in these family court cases. This is a civil issue. You need to go and get an attorney. And you're talking about a child that's not in your possession, and they should be, and you're concerned because maybe there was this history of domestic violence, and your case is already a high conflict case. Now, for you to tell me I have to go back to court to get help, that's not resolving anything, because that's going to take effort, time, and we don't know what's going to happen. And so, at the result of that denial was the murder of Kayden Mancuso. And what we have discovered with Greyson, Greyson Kessler out of the Florida case. And I personally requested the police report, because I wanted to know, are these cases related in this way, that a parent was denied the reporting of custodial interference? Because that opens up a huge door there, that we're really fighting for the same thing, but they're really overlooking this major part that could have prevented what happened here. And in Greyson's law, it was the same thing. Allie Kessler called law enforcement for assistance, and she was denied. And what we're looking at is, those are two that we've confirmed, but there are many other states that are going to be pushing for this law. And we're just, out of curiosity, we want to know if at that point, before this child was murdered, or children were murdered, because in some states it's more than one child that was, or sibling that was murdered, did it involve law enforcement denying a parent their right to report this crime? Because if that's the case, legislation, everyone really needs to start looking at what we need to do to fix it. We just don't need training in the judicial system. We need training in our law enforcement system. And we know that they're bombarded, but a lot of these states get funding for a lot of these types of training. And they really need to look to see if this is being covered, because when you're denying a parent and something happens, you really you need to spotlight this. These things are preventable, and they're not putting a lot of attention on these things. So those are just two that we've come across. We're interested in, continuing the research on the others, but it's just something that we want people to know that's out there. We don't how would you say it? We don't want to just say, parents, you just need to go and start advocating for certain things. We kind of want to show them the step by step, and when you go along the way, you're going to learn some things, or you're going to come across some things, and then what can you do with it? You can share it, make parents more aware of these findings, and because you never know when you're going to get in front of a legislator and have an opportunity to present an idea or proposal and say, hey, here's an example of why this law it's important to enforce this law. And because now you have something important to back that up. And that's what we've presented in a lot of our meetings.
Well, even, it's horrible with a child murder. It's just as horrible with a child suicide too, when there's custodial interference. It just doesn't seem to end.
Right.
You can have as many, laws as you want. The same thing keeps happening anyway, because they're not enforcing the custodial interference laws.
And that's why we need people to say this isn't right. People have to step up and start saying, hey, wait a minute, this is my right and this has to happen. And they have to start, letting legislators know and speaking up. Yeah,
because we look at that it's not a mom's issue, it's not a dad's issue. The thing that we're concerned of the most is making sure that kids see both parents, and when they have that, they do better. When they're both parents are fit, willing, and able, they do better. And I think that when you have a law that's in place and you're not enforcing it, there is going to be an impact on this child, that when they don't see that child, this is going to impact them, that relationship. It's going to break it down, it's going to damage it somehow, or it can lead to something like you mentioned, the suicide, those issues. And so to just ignore it, completely, you're not serving or protecting. You're not doing those duties that you took an oath to fulfill. You're completely ignoring that. And we do have, we're not saying all officers are bad officers. What we're saying is there's just training that's required, because this is a huge training and educational issue. Because we do have some law enforcement that we've spoken to that are experiencing similar things, and they didn't even know it was a law. And now they're trying to help make some change. One in Texas, he's actually testified on a custodial interference bill a few times this session. There's one in Florida, and he's trying to get the state to do some mandated training or help with an executive directive to get more training, on this issue. So there are many that are have that law enforcement experience that are actually helping parents trying to make this change, whether it's legislatively or going through some agency or some mandated training. They're actually very helpful. And we had an event, I believe it was April 8th, and Petra interviewed a few of these individuals, and that was a really amazing event. We did have the Interference with Child Custody Awareness Day on April 8th, and it was a huge success. We're really trying to connect this to the parent-child contact issues, which some parents refer to as parental alienation. There is a connection here, because when you are denying that child and that parent from having that time, you're using that opportunity to smear them, to manipulate them, to empower them against the other parent, just to do a lot of those things. And so that's why enforcing the law is so important. So we're trying to get parents to make that connection, that this issue could mitigate a lot of that if you're aware of it, that if you could spread it, if you could share it with other parents, so that we could start enforcing laws that are already on the books, So, you know, because there's so many, like, I haven't seen my child in 3 years, or I haven't seen my child in 10 months. Okay, so what are you doing about that? Oh, well, I'm waiting on my attorney. I'm saving up. Okay, well, there's this law that exists, you know, and this is what it takes to get it enforced, is learning how to research your law, how to talk to law enforcement, how to really separate your case and your story from just reporting the crime, because oftentimes they have all these emotions. They're, you know, they're trying to explain what type of person their ex is at the same time of, I haven't seen my child in so much. That's a lot of drama. And we know that everybody has a story, but you have to separate that. You have to compartmentalize that away from the facts and just sticking to facts. Otherwise, you muddy the water when you're trying to talk to them, and you completely, you just lose them. They're like, okay, this is way too much. This is a civil issue. Go talk to your attorney, because it just totally kind of just throws everything off. So that's kind of where you have to be in the right place to articulate, you know, I'm just here to report a crime officer, and how to talk to them, and know the law, understand it really well before you go and say, well, this is what it says, but oh, you didn't read it all, and it only applies here. So that you have to read and understand the whole law, because every state law is different.
And how to be assertive but not aggressive, which is hard when your emotions are high and you know that you're probably going to walk away without your child again.
Yeah, that's a huge one. That was really important to know. Is that you could be assertive, but you don't have to be aggressive. You could just, you know, I just like to report a crime, that sort of thing.
One parent told me about, you know, reporting this as an offense report, and asked the policeman, you know, why don't you go get them? I know exactly where they're at. And their response was, well, I don't want to traumatize them. You know, again, either they don't want to do it. It's very frustrating. I mean, they got to know that.
Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say they're told, you know, they feel like they're making this kind of trauma choice and all this, and that has nothing to do with them. They just have to read the court order, and they do believe, at least anyone that we've talked to, that the family courts will handle it. That's the way that the police officers believe. They just believe that they're not qualified enough, you know, and they're not educated in the fact that that's not what we're talking about. This is not like them deciding custody. It's them just enforcing a court order, you know.
Yeah, and it's the same thing for law enforcement, for them to be assertive and tell the other parent, like, you know what, it's not up to the children. You have an agreement with this other parent. You need to have their bags packed and ready, and they need to get in that parent's car. Do we understand that? Otherwise, you see this law, I'm going to enforce this law. Oh, but officer, I can't make them. Well, wait a minute. You can make them go to school. You can make them go to bed. You can make them brush their teeth. You can make sure they don't drink or smoke in your house or do drugs. You can make sure, you can parent them that way. But here, you don't want to parent them, because you don't want them to have a relationship with the other parent if it comes down to it. You just don't want to say that. So that's where the custodial interference comes in. And so you do have those law enforcement officers from time to time that they will assert, you know, that right. They'll say, hey, you know, we have an order. Are you going to comply with it or not? And I've heard from parents where the officer will tell the two daughters, you need to get your butt in your dad's car. I don't want to hear anything of it. Get in your father's car. And that's it. And the kids are kind of shocked, but they get in the dad's car. Dad gets them for the weekend. They have a great weekend. And dad was shocked because he never had one of those officers that ever did this. They always said, oh, it's a civil matter. You know, I'll give you a report, but not this officer. He said, no, go with your dad right now. Get in the car. And they did. Yeah. And, you know, and so, you know, a lot of officers might just feel like we don't want to get involved. We don't want to get involved in any of this. And I don't blame them, but if this is what the law says, this is what the law says.
And like you said, it comes down to education. They need to know that this is okay to follow their law.
Right.
And be comfortable doing it. And this is, you know, it's the same thing as if going after a criminal. They have to have that mindset. And they don't. They have the family court mindset, or they're calling the DA on call who's saying, no, we can't get involved. They're in a custody battle.
Yeah, and I think that rarely happens. We just spoke with the Delaware County district attorney who said no one has ever called him in reference to that law, ever, in the whole county. And he's been doing this for years. It's crazy to think that the police need a different direction on top of that. But one of the representatives had shared with us in Philadelphia, there was an issue with squatting that's against the law.
Mm-hmm.
And so what had to happen was they would go and they would say, you're not supposed to be here. Oh, and they would just say, I am. And the police would go, okay, it's civil, when it wasn't. So the way that they resolved that was getting a directive sent down from the attorney general to the district attorney to the police that said, when this happens, you should say, let me see the deed. And if they don't have a deed, then you make them leave. So we need one of them in Pennsylvania too. That gives the direction on how to follow the law, because police departments do not have a policy about it.
So should parents go to their police stations after looking up these laws and go to them and say, hey, do you know about these laws that are on the books? And this is what should happen, and not to call the DA on call. That's not even anything that should happen. Here's a court order. Here are the codes, the laws, and this is what needs to happen. Like, can parents maybe get together, maybe have maybe one, or could be one parent, get a meeting with a couple of officers, if that is possible, and sit down and talk to them and go over the laws?
Absolutely. We have a group in Pennsylvania doing that too, trying to reach out to all different people to talk to them, because you can't just go one route. But it's like the police chief, and you can request a police policy procedural manual through the open records requests. That act in Pennsylvania is called RTK, where you can put in a request to see if they have a policy and procedural manual. If they don't, then that's absolutely something that you can go to, either the DA, the police chief, the attorney general we're trying to get a meeting with. But, that direction that has to happen. A policy has to be made for this law.
Yeah, and so the idea is to get parents to think outside the box of family court. And just like, we hear a lot that we should be encouraging critical thinking with these children that are alienated. We should be doing the same thing for parents, to start asking questions. Ask the right questions. Okay, well, if you're not going to enforce this law, then what does it mean here being in the penal code? What is it actually? When do you enforce this law? And if you're telling me that that this law can't be enforced because I'm in family court, well, it doesn't say that in the law. So why does this? Why are you telling me this? Or do you call the district attorney for every crime before you arrest someone, or before you enforce it? Because that seems really odd that you're just picking certain ones and then you're calling them up to confirm. So these are the questions that parents can come up with, and it's just the way you ask. I'm like, I don't understand this, officer, but where does it say that in the penal code? And they're going to say, well, that's our policy. Okay, well, can I have your policy? Because I don't believe policies supersede laws. That's not the way that it works. And so, and they may not like the questions, but it's just the way that you ask. Or you do like Rael said, a public records request, a right to know. And it's called different things in different states, a Freedom of Information Act, or I forgot what the other terms are, but you could submit one and just ask, I'd like a policy. And if they don't have a policy, the closest thing that you can get to learning how to enforce custodial interference is, how would you enforce a missing persons or a missing child? Because it begins with reporting the crime. So what's that process? Because I want to know, it's the closest thing to custodial interference is reporting child abductions or a missing child. And so what are those steps? And they have to have a policy for that.
It's a matter of just doing your job.
Yeah, and we get these questions all the time. Some of them, they're just repeated questions that parents are just finding us out, and we just let them know that we host a lot of events. Right now, we haven't done them lately because we're busy legislating and we're really involved in doing that, but we host a lot of events either on weekends, or we also have meetings, you know, Pennsylvania meets on Monday, Florida meets Tuesday, Texas and California meet Wednesday, one right after the other. You know, parents can join, and these are hosted by the National Parents Organization. Each state, well, certain states have a chapter, but they're willing to advertise that for us, and we get on the call and we just wait for parents to join in, and they have any questions. Some of them don't know what to do. Like, how do I get involved? I didn't know about this bill, or I didn't know this was being, you know, they don't even know what legislation is. They don't know when they're in session. They don't realize that they can actually propose an idea, or they could propose their you know, I oppose or I support this bill kind of thing. They don't really, I never did it. I didn't know. And when you get involved this way, you can actually make a difference. You could submit a statement that says, I support this bill because this impacted me and I think the law needs to be fixed. It could be something as simple as that, but parents don't know that these are read by a committee and they really truly matter. And you know, a lot of parents will say, well, the laws need to change. Okay, well, you're the one that's going to need to change that, because these legislators don't live these situations and experiences. And so when we can share the many that we have, that's the reason why the laws need to change. And so
quickly.
Yeah. And so Rael and I, we kind of walk parents through the process. And it doesn't have to be, you know, the length of advocacy that we do, because we're doing it constantly. But it could be something as just attend a meeting, you know, maybe get a policy from your law enforcement officer, and then you can share it with us and we can go through it together, and just, you know, it's something like that. Some people have never done a public records request. They don't know where to look, or I don't know how to ask. I don't know how to write my request. I
would have never thought that we had the right to see the police policy and procedural manual, or internal emails, or, you know, I would have never thought that you could do that.
Yeah, and it's just learning it, because I mean, what's the worst they're going to tell you? No? Well, it was no yesterday before I even tried, but today I tried and I got it. Or like Rael and I did, I wrote one and I didn't word it correctly, and then she reworded it and resubmitted and she got it. So mine didn't work based on the language I use, and then she just changed some things around and she submitted it and she got it. So it's just,
and we have been told no a lot, right? I mean, that can't be something that stops us.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't. I mean, because, and I hate to say this, but what do we have to lose? Some of us parents, what do we have to lose? We've already lost so much. So no one can control how much you advocate. No one can control anymore what you do to make changes. No one can control that. That's all within you, whether you want to do it or not. But you know, it's that saying, if I'm going down, I'm going to go down swinging. I'm going to go down making some form of change. And if it wasn't a law that I got passed, at least I changed another parent's perspective that, yes, you can do something. And that's enough for me, is that I changed. Like Rael, I mean, we met about a year ago, and she jumped on board. And then now I'm like, oh my God, Rael's amazing, because she just remembers everything and she just go. Well, that's good for me, because it was hard when it was me doing it, and
it's hard to follow. Claudia's the idea woman, and she's got a lot of them, and I work on trying to follow up. But you know, I saw her doing something that was making a difference, and I was like, I need to do this here, you know. And that's what we teach other parents, is this model that works to make a difference, that Claudia did in Texas. You see it's successful. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We help everybody walk through it. We just teach you, let's just do what works, you know?
Yeah, and we do have those parents that are kind of like Debbie Downers. They're like, this isn't going to work. Nothing's ever going to change. Well, not with that attitude. I'm sorry. I'm not for that attitude. I'm for, let me at least try to make a little bit of change, and maybe someone can take that little change and then they can add on to it and add on to it, and it just kind of keeps going. Because like I said, I never got involved in this. I didn't even know who I voted for. I would just go in there and select a ballot, and I'm like, I've never met them. I don't know what they do. then I went to a town hall, and I'm
Mhm.
like, you can come bring your complaints to this person? I didn't know that. And they listened. And next thing you know, other parents came, and it just went from there. And I'm like, wow, I can call them up, and when I need something, oh my God. So now I know my representative so well. I know his staff so well. It's on like a first name basis. And one of them told me, oh, I'm expecting the child, I'll be on maternity leave. Oh my God, congratulations. And you know, it's just this rapport that you have with them.
Mhm.
And they're so helpful. And then when I have a bill, I'm like, can you please support this bill? And I sent out something, and they responded. And it was really interesting that they are listening. And so you know, it's really important to know who your representatives are, whether it's city council or your county commissioners or your house rep or your state senator. It's really important to know who they are.
And it's all in communication
Mhm.
and just explaining the facts.
Mhm.
You know, facts don't have feelings. I think Ben Shapiro said that. But, you know, just to say the facts, leave your story out of it, and
Right.
just stick to the facts when you're explaining this to these people, because, or like you said earlier, their eyes are going to glaze over and they're going to be thinking about Dunkin' Donuts, you know?
Right. Yep. And you want to keep their attention, you know, on the
Mhm.
facts, not on the other court drama. My attorney said, and I've already spent thousands of dollars to be here. And they don't want to know, they don't need to know all that. Just stick to the facts of reporting a crime, and that's it.
Because
And
we need to do this for the sake of future generations.
yeah. And so, you know, one of the things is I come across so many posts of people that are just sharing these sad stories of how long it's been since they've seen their child. And I'll mention, you know, come on board. There's other parents that are collaborating to make some type of change, and they just don't feel that they're in the right spot to do that, and that's okay. But then there's parents that have not seen their children for maybe decades and still follow these pages. But I'm always wondering, like, okay, you're still here, but do you want to get involved and make a change? And some of them don't, because nobody ever helped them, and they're more of, I don't want to help anybody because nobody helped me kind of mentality.
Mhm.
But you know, there are others that, like, yeah, I'll do it, I'll help. And those are the ones that put in that extra time, and because we're just volunteers, you know, we all have our careers and families, and some of us still get to see our children. But for
Mhm.
those that want to make that change, there is a lot of opportunity, and we need a
Right.
lot of help. Because Rael and I talk all the time. It's by messenger, or we have some groups that we're in the same group together, just trying to get parents to get more involved, to try to fix an issue versus just keep sharing your sad story, keep
Right.
complaining about the judicial system. You know, sure, you can write complaints about judges, you can write complaints about attorneys, but you know what, all those committees or those panels, they're just reviewed by other attorneys and other judges.
Mhm.
So why don't we try to do something that we can actually change, which is enforcing the law? And you know, and a lot of parents, they're like, well, no, I have to ask my attorney. I'm like, you don't
No.
have to use your attorney to report a crime, you know? And then I tell everyone, the reason that you probably don't know this law is because your attorney only practices family law, and this is a penal code. So they're not familiar with the penal codes. They're more familiar with the family codes.
Mhm.
And then another reason why they probably won't tell you about this law is because then you won't need them to report, you know, a motion for enforcement or a denial of visitation or something. You won't need them to file a motion in civil court, because now you're going to go the criminal route, and that's for free.
Mhm.
So that's the way that I see it. My attorney didn't know it was a law, and when I kept telling her, she just shook her head, and she's like, no, we can't do that. That's not, you know, she was very dismissive of it. And then, of course, like, when you go after this crime, you're going to look like some vindictive ex, because now you're trying to get your ex arrested or something.
Mhm.
No, I'm reporting a crime. You know, whether they're going to be judged or go before a jury, that's not, I have no control over that. That's on them. But if I was robbed or assaulted, are you telling me I can't report that? So I know that for me, that's what they used. They
Mhm.
tried questioning me that, oh, you just want to put the other person in jail. No, I just want to report a crime. That's all. I can't determine the outcome of that. I'm
Right.
just reporting a crime. And
Do you think some parents are afraid to do this because their attorney will dump them? Because they're thinking, I had a hard time getting this attorney. I paid out, a $5,200 retaining fee. If I rock the boat, then I'm
yeah,
on my own.
right. And they may think that, and that's something they'll have to consider, but does their attorney need to know that they reported a crime? I don't know.
Well,
And even if you reported a crime, it's just between them and their attorney, that attorney-client privilege.
mhm,
So now you're going to say that I'm rocking the boat and you're going to withdraw from my case because I'm going to make it difficult. How am I making it difficult when you're not going to be handling this? It's going to be, it's going to be the prosecutor that handles this. Or is it because you'll have to answer for your client who went and filed this?
mhm.
So
I
it
mean,
varies.
it shouldn't be a big deal. The attorney shouldn't want to drop your case because, you're a cash cow. So you think they'd keep you around anyway.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah, but I had the experience of my attorney not knowing. And now if you ever Google, and maybe it's just my search engine because I'm always looking for these news stories. There's a lot of news stories on custodial interference. I actually search for custodial interference news or parental kidnapping news, and I'll find them all over the US and I'll share them with parents. It's like, look, it is real.
mhm,
It is a crime because here's a new story, and I'll try to find the current ones. But when I do the search for custodial interference, you'd be surprised at how many law firms come up. How many, they just pop up in my search, and I'm like, this has never happened before. So obviously they know it's a law, but the minute that you start reading some of their blogs or the information on these attorneys' websites, it tells you what they can do, and their remedy is like, oh, I can file a motion for enforcement, or I can file a motion for contempt. Well, that's not reporting custodial interference criminally. That is, again, keeping the money back into the family court system and reporting that, filing that motion, in that route where you need to retain the attorney. So you have to read all that fine print, but there are a lot of law firms now that if you just type custodial interference, you'll see all these law firms that try to give advice on, oh yeah, we take on these cases, we do this. Call us, we can do a free consultation. So it's pretty interesting.
yeah, I didn't know that. I didn't even know that. I never even heard of that. But
Yeah, you'll have a lot of law firms that'll say, oh, we handle custodial interference. And there was a law firm that actually, it's on YouTube, where he actually explains reporting the crime and everything, and he gives you like a step process. And I'm like, that's interesting. I've never seen so many attorneys now marketing or trying to advertise that they handle custodial interference, but they're just trying to get that client in, to sign them, to retain them, and keep it back in family court. So you don't need an attorney to report a crime. If, like I said, if you were mugged, burglarized, assaulted, you'd be calling law enforcement. You wouldn't be calling your attorney.
right.
So that's where a lot of parents get confused on that. And I mentioned this, like, have you considered custodial interference? Yeah, my attorney, like, no, wait a minute, that's going a different route. You don't need an attorney. That's totally different. And or like you mentioned, they're a little bit hesitant because they're concerned that they're going to rock the boat, and or they're afraid that if they call law enforcement, how is it going to look to their children? Their child's going to see them as, oh, you want to put my mom or dad in jail. No, I have a right to report a crime. And you need to understand that there is laws in place and there's agreements in place. And when someone doesn't uphold to that, it means something.
Right.
And that's the message that you also are telling kids, that laws and rules don't matter.
Mhm,
Now,
mhm.
if one parent can break them, well, that means I don't have to listen to them either. Why do I need to listen to my teacher? Why do I need to put my seatbelt on? That's what you're telling these kids, is that these laws don't apply. That means I'll never be held accountable because they don't matter. And that's the message a lot of these parents are really kind of are sharing with their kids.
Exactly, and they're also sharing with their kids reading court documents, judges' orders, which I mean, I think even just looking at a judge's order when you're going through this trauma is, like, horrifying for an adult to read, but yet they'll show it to a child in the presence of a psychologist to make it look okay. But,
Right.
this kid knows more about your case than you do.
Yes, absolutely. That's one of the most horrific things, is involving them in the court issues and the process, where they know a lot of these details, where they can
Yeah.
relate a lot of the language, like what 12-year-old can say, contempt, or just, these kind of these law words that are out there that they use, and they repeat it, and it's like, where did they get this? And it's because you're what you said, they share a lot of this information with the child by involving them, and it's really harmful. They don't realize that it's really harmful to them.
And that is child psychological abuse, again.
Yeah, it
And,
is.
it's just so wrong to take a child's pure mind and turn it into hatred for the other parent.
Right, or the other grandparents,
Oh,
like
grandpa yeah. Oh,
in
that whole side.
my situation, my son was told that we were in court, but then he asked, well, was she by herself? And my son was said, no, your grandparents were there. So it just turns the child against the grandparents, because now it's not just my mom against my dad, it's my grandmother and grandfather against my dad. And so I don't want to have anything to do with that. Well, you know what? Parents support their child. So if my parents are going to be there to support me, they're going to be there to support me. And so it's just another way of poisoning them against, extended family and things like that. And it's involving them. You don't have to give them those details, like, oh, someone was there with her, but you don't have to give them those details.
Mhm.
It's not going to help the situation. It'll benefit that parent, that other parent that told them, but it doesn't help the relationship that child had with those grandparents.
And I think these are parents that just don't care. They just are out to destroy the other parent by any means possible. Been there, done that. Everybody's credit score tanks, and this is what happens in family court. If you can do anything, just try to not go in there. It's not even a real courtroom. This is a kangaroo court. And that's why we have the police who enforce these custodial interference laws. And had they been doing this all along, these two kids would still be alive.
Right. And that's what a lot of these advocates that are out there, they need to realize. I know there's a lot of emphasis on the training for judges and the training for evaluators. You really also have to include the training that's required or that's necessary for law enforcement. Because with the whole Kaydens thing, they're trying to focus that the problem was only the court system. The court system and the judges are the problem. Well, law enforcement really failed here for
Right.
those children, and that needs to be mentioned, and parents need to be aware that that's what happened, and this has been confirmed. So it's not just the court that needs to be addressed, it's the law enforcement and these resources that are out there and available to parents, that they need to have better training, better education. And that's what we want parents to know, is there's more to this, to this whole situation with Kaydens Law and how we got to where it's at. And it is a bill that is being presented in every state, but there are concerns about the law. We're all about protecting children, but in the law they only mention sexual and physical abuse, and they touch on emotional abuse, but where is the child psychological abuse mentioned in that bill, and it's not, or I'm sorry, in that law. And so when these bills are presented at a state level, that needs to be included. And I believe I know the reason why it's not, and that's because it's something that would need to be defined in the state, and it's really hard to define another form of abuse because now you need more training. You need CPS to know how to assess child psychological abuse, because you can assess sexual and physical abuse because you can look for bruises, you can have an examination, you can do all these other things, and but for child psychological abuse, where is that training going to be on this CPS, worker or staff or whoever, and are they going to be able to do that? The turnover is so high. How are they going to have that knowledge or that ability or to assess that? But you're trying to make training on other little aspects, so why can't that be included? And there is federal incentive, so why not include that in that they get that type of training as well? So parents need to know about that child psychological abuse is not in the language, and it needs to be.
It definitely needs to be. In 2014, the APA wrote that child psychological abuse is far worse than sexual and physical combined. And,
Right.
I mean, it's all bad. It's all horrible. But with the psychological abuse, it's going to affect multiple generations. I'm sure sexual abuse too could affect multiple generations, but it's the psychological element it gets twisted.
Right. And that's why it's still, it doesn't need to be ignored. They have to acknowledge it, and it needs to be somehow in the law. We have an idea of how we introduce it and present it, but it's really up to parents to get involved and notice that these bills are coming to their state. And you may not be able to, like I said, get involved like Rael and I do at this level, having meetings, talking to legislators, going to the Capitol and testifying on bills, but you have the ability to submit something to a committee and say, I would like to see child psychological abuse included, because that is a form of abuse that is in the DSM-5. So why wouldn't you include it when you're trying to protect children? When you're mentioning keeping children safe from family violence, that occurs in family violence. So why isn't it included? And you can ask these questions. You can testify. You can submit a letter. There's so many different ways that you could get involved. And the more letters they get, the more they have to record on record. Some parents go to testify in person. Some parents will call in and say, I support this bill or I oppose this bill. But this is where the change comes from. It comes from the parents that are impacted, because your child currently doesn't have a voice and they can't really do this right now, but you can, whether your outcome was that you have your child and you're reunited, or if you don't have your children and they're still alienated, or there is still, some issues that you're trying to work out, you still have that opportunity to know what bills are coming in your state and how you can support and oppose them. Right. And that's what we do. We're not just about supporting bills. I'm a supporter of equal shared parenting, and I'm a supporter of bills that support, getting parental alienation or child psychological abuse recognized. But there are some bills that I disagree with, and so I will oppose them. And one of them is Kaydens Law, because it doesn't cover child psychological abuse. So you can oppose with amendments, you can oppose it completely, or you can support it, or
can you ask them to amend it?
Yeah, you can ask for an amendment. Say, right. I'd like an amendment on this. And the more parents that have the same concern, they'll look at all that and say, okay, we got so many parents that want child psychological abuse in here. Why aren't we thinking it that way? And they'll come back and normally when there's a bill, they'll have a bill analysis, and you'll see why opposition had issues, why supporters had issues, and you'll give you a little insight of how they're looking at this bill, whether it's going to cost anything to to pass this bill? Is there going to be money that's or appropriations that they have to consider? There's a lot that goes into it, but parents still have that opportunity to just, you know, I have a bill here in Texas, and I shared the link with my family. I'm like, look, just go to this. Here's the bill number. In the comments, just say, I support this. You could say that and I would tell my sisters, you know, your nephew was withheld, or my sister experienced this and she can't see her children, something to that effect. And they all did it. And my parents, I sent it to my parents. I'm like, just type in something simple. I support this bill. You know, this impacted my relationship with my grandson, something. Right. And they all did it. And it was exciting for them to do it, because now they've become an advocate. They've done something that they've never done before. And it wasn't just about, okay, I don't have a relationship with my grandson anymore and that's it. But no, I'm going to do something to try to get this law passed. And we found out on, I think it was on Friday. So our bill in Texas is actually advancing. So it's going to be presented on the Senate side. We have about a month left. And we're hoping that the bill moves forward. And that's on the custodial interference. And we're keeping our eye on that, because that's the bill where it would allow law enforcement to issue a civil penalty when the parent withholds a child. And the felony still will still be there. But for these situations where a parent shows up to the exchange point and the other parent doesn't want to comply, now the officer will have an extra tool that they could use and say, okay, if you have your court orders, you're supposed to be here at 6 o'clock and it's now 6:40 and you're not going to release the child. I'll give you two options. You can either release the child and comply with the order, or I'm going to issue you a ticket. And the ticket can be anywhere from $0 to $500. You'll have to go to municipal court. It's just like a speeding ticket, and that's it. And so that's what the bill is about. But it allows a municipality or local city or town to adopt it. It doesn't require them to. It's not mandatory. So it's just a step up from where we are. Try to get these laws enforced somehow. And we've had some opposition. You know, we've had some legislators basically say, well, you're going to inconvenience the other parent.
Oh,
like,
no.
They're going to have to pay a fine. Oh my gosh. Well, do you know how much it costs for the other parent to go back to court to enforce their orders?
Oh.
You're comparing $0 to $500 to a couple of $1,000. And that's which one's more inconvenienced. So, you know, we're not trying to make the other parent a felon. We're trying to ensure that the child sees both parents and that the orders are followed. And if this was a speeding ticket and you were speeding, you learn from that speeding ticket and you don't speed anymore, or you're more cautious. So if you think about it, you know, you don't want a speeding ticket, don't speed. Same thing with this civil penalty. If you don't want a civil penalty, then stop withholding the child. So that's how we've gotten that. And it had a testimony. I was unable to make it. I travel a lot for my job and I was out of state, but I watched the hearing, and they had a lot of support. And so we're hoping that this bill will get passed this session.
Well, that's great. That's great. I'm glad I had you both on. This is what we need to be talking about, and to act on it, not just talk, you know, we're talking, we're explaining, and then we're going to act on it. Okay. You know, and that's just what we have to do to save our future generations.
Absolutely. And anyone listening, you know, if you don't know how to get started, just reach out to one of us and we can steer you in the right direction. Or, you know, if you want to just make an impact, you might, you know, it just starts really small. Just, you know, you can hear, you know, how we enforce the law. You can hear how we get laws changed. How do you propose a bill? Anything like that, we can help you with that. And And it's just the small changes, but when you combine all these small changes, in the end, it's a big movement. So yeah, for anyone, I like how you said that. It's not about just talking, it's about acting out, sort of thing.
Yeah, we all have to start doing it because this involves our children and this child psychological abuse. And if people say that doesn't exist, well, what do you think coercive control is? It's just like the same thing in a roundabout way. But
Right.
how can people reach you if they have any questions?
We have the Facebook page, which is the Interference with Child Custody Coalition. We also have support groups in every state. One of our biggest states right now that's doing amazing work is Florida, and that's being led by Chris Felder, and I'm sure you've interviewed him before. But it's the page that you can message. Also, I have a page, a website, heroesforchildrensrights.org. We cover a lot of the same topics because I'm a Marine veteran. I advocate for the military community on these issues, and so that's where I got the idea and have the page. But it's all connected to our Facebook page, Interference with Child Custody Coalition. So yeah, I hear from parents all the time, and so does Rael, and she gets meetings kind of scheduled, and she starts talking to parents, and she's pushing things there in Pennsylvania, and we're kind of like jumping different states trying to help parents, and sometimes it's overwhelming because we're all in different time zones, but I do appreciate your time and you talking with us both today and everything that you do.
Well, I appreciate everything you're doing and Rael's doing. I totally appreciate it. So don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Claudia Ovalles and Rael LaPenta in the future, because I know I'm going to have you both back on again and for another exciting episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.